Delta 3D printers have always been pretty mesmerizing to me. Something about the three arms on them whipping around like some kind of crazy spider. I've always just loved watching them work and watching them print. Since getting into 3D printing, I've had my fair share of Deltas that I've tested out and reviewed on this channel. The original ones were very difficult to assemble and calibration was even harder. As time has progressed though, they've gotten much easier to put together and a lot of the calibration has become much more automated, which is awesome and something that I am very, very thankful for. A huge benefit of Delta 3D printers is that the bed on them is stationary. It does not go up or down and it does not go forward and backwards like that of a Prusa style design. The arms move in the X, Y, and Z axis. And so what that allows for, paired with kind of a Bowden style extruder, is a very lightweight gantry system and a very rigid machine, which does allow you to typically print at speeds that you just would not be able to achieve on a standard Cartesian style 3D printer or something similar to that. In today's video, we are going to take a look at the FLSUN Q5, which is a fairly compact Delta 3D printer. What originally caught my eye with this machine and what got me hyped on it was its claim to be very easy to assemble. Not everybody wants to do an 8-hour kit. Certainly they have a special place in my heart because that's how I got into all of this, but I understand, and we've been so spoiled with either fully assembled or nearly fully assembled semi-kits now, so seeing that there was a Delta out there that was nearly fully assembled or very much so a quick install and at a price point that is around $230 to $250 US, I was intrigued and I had to test this out for myself. So in today's video, we are going to go over the specs of the FLSUN Q5. We're going to go over what the assembly was like, and then we're going to do some printing. And after all that, I will give my final impressions on what I think about this 3D printer. I hope you guys are excited, and let's get into the video. So before getting into printing or the assembly, let's talk a bit about some of the specs on this machine. It has a 200 millimeter diameter build volume by 200 millimeters in height, which for a Delta printer is pretty conservative. Most Delta printers I've seen are typically more like 300 by 300-ish. So this would certainly be considered, in my opinion, a smaller, more compacted Delta 3D printer. It does have a 32-bit board, which is something that is certainly becoming more and more popular amongst budget desktop 3D printers, which is something that I am very thankful for. And I do think that with a Delta having typically more of a mathematical calculation in terms of its movement, having that 32-bit board is certainly welcome and great to have included with this machine. It also has auto bed leveling, a Titan style extruder, a full touch screen. It's got print recovery, so if you lose power or if the switch on the printer accidentally gets turned off, you can go ahead and resume your print. And lastly, the build plate is kind of like the Ultra Base that comes on a lot of Anycubic printers, which personally is one of my favorite build surfaces that currently is out there. So again, I was super excited to see that that was the build surface that came included with this printer. So compared to a lot of the printers that I've been reviewing lately that seem to be much bigger, the box for this printer was very small and a lot lighter than I initially anticipated. Inside the box, it came with everything that you'll need to get set up and running. However, it only came with a tiny strand of filament, so you certainly will want to pick up at least one roll of filament. Otherwise, you're going to be very sad when you assemble the printer and have no material to print with. As far as instructions go on assembly, it did come with a little printed out sheet that I will say was not the best. However, given the fact that this machine uses only one style and one size screw, as far as assembly goes, putting the pieces together was very easy because, again, there was just one bag of screws that you basically connected pieces together within the pictures, and I was able to put this Delta printer together in around 30 minutes, even with just the one sheet of included instructions. Huge heads up though, on the little SD card that comes with the printer, when I plugged it in to get the slicer and things like that set up, I did notice that there was some video files, and after watching them, there is a full high definition install, build, assembly guide on the SD card, as well as the whole leveling sequence that it takes you through. So I say scrap the paper, plug in the SD card, and follow the video. It was a really nice video. I was actually super impressed with it, and I think that that should probably become a standard moving forward with a lot of these kit 3D printers. So as mentioned earlier, this printer does have auto bed leveling. It is not something that's permanently attached to the machine though. It basically plugs in, is held on by a magnet. You run the initial leveling sequence after just checking to make sure that your Z height is correct with a piece of paper. It goes through its leveling sequence and it checks something like 25 points. So it checks a ton of points considering that it's not a huge plate. Once that's done, then you go ahead and unplug and put the leveling probe off to the side and you are ready to go. That is it. It was a very, very simple process. And even the touchscreen little UI, when you start the leveling process, it takes you through things and tells you like, make sure you've got the leveling plugged in. And then before doing the or the Z offset, it tells you, make sure you unplug this so that way it doesn't crash into the bed. So it does a really good job of guiding you through the setup sequence, which for me, like, wasn't a huge deal, but for certainly someone that's a little uncertain, it's a really nice bit of handholding that I think is kindly welcome for just, again, the initial setup of the printer. Once I was done with that, I went ahead and loaded up some blue PLA filament. I saw that there was 2 pre-sliced files on the SD card, which I don't usually go with the pre-sliced files on SD cards for printers, but I decided in this case to let it run. The print started going, and I noticed that the nozzle was a little bit too high. So luckily in the UI on the little touchscreen, you're able to actually baby step up or down the Z while it's printing. So I just bumped up the Z ever so slightly and it was beginning to lay down a perfect first layer. However, after a couple of layers of printing, I noticed that it was under extruding pretty heavily. There was a lot of stringing going on and I could just clearly see that it was not laying down a very clean bead of filament. So upon taking a look at the Titan style extruder that's mounted onto the printer, I saw that the tension screw was very, very loose. So I went ahead and tightened or loosened, I guess in this case, the tension screw to make it where it had a tighter grip on the filament, and the filament began to lay down a perfect path. So I went ahead and killed the print and I restarted the print again just now that I had the leveling correct and I had the extrusion tension correct on the printer. The first print was a pretty simple kind of flat elephant that said FLSUN on the side. Nothing too impressive, but I mean, the print did turn out fine. It was successful. The build plate held down very well. So then I went ahead and moved on to the second print, and the second print was a threaded bolt and a nut, and that actually was pretty impressive. Taking it off of the printer, it did thread on. It took a little bit of elbow grease, sure, the first time I twisted it on, but after that, it spun pretty freely on the bolt. So definitely not a standard calibration or sample print, but I was pretty happy with this and I was ready to move on to slicing up something of my own on the computer. On the SD card, there is a version of Cura that I went ahead and installed. It's an older version of Cura, so I installed it. I added the profile for the FLSUN Q5. I downloaded a benchy, I sliced the benchy, and I hit print. Once I hit print, I stepped away. I came back a few moments later and saw that there was no filament coming out, which I thought was really, really strange. I pushed the filament through the nozzle. I saw that it was flowing, so I went ahead and restarted it, and shortly after saw that it was air printing again. I don't exactly know, and I didn't investigate too much as to what the reasoning was as for why it was doing this. It definitely seems to have been something in the slicer, so what I ended up doing was just using my version of Cura, which I already have installed on here, the latest version of Cura. And in Cura, there's actually, like in official Cura, there is a FLSUN, I believe it's the QQ profile, which is another one of FLSUN's Delta printers. So I just added the profile for that, and that printer, that Delta is a little bit bigger, so I scaled it down to the correct size on this and I resliced the benchy. Well, once I did that, I hit print and the benchy printed out and it turned out beautifully. So again, it leads me to think there's something with the slicer that was included on there. If you do use the slicer that comes on the SD card and you notice you're having the same issues, just download official Cura. It's not a huge deal. And again, if you just do what I said as far as copying over the profile from the other Delta printer that's already built into Cura, the FLSUN QQ, I believe it was, then it's a super simple thing to do. But I do think that FLSUN should probably fix whatever that is, and I will send them off a message to let them know. But again, for me, it wasn't a big deal, and I'm glad I don't have to juggle between multiple versions of Cura. I've got the profile for this guy now just built into the Cura that I use every day for all my other printers. So once the quick benchy finished printing, I decided it's time to go big. So there's this little adorable like death figure that I found online that I've printed before, and I went ahead and scaled that up. I printed it out. It was about a 20-hour print, and overall, I think it turned turned out really nicely. There is a couple of parts where there's a little bit on like the bridging where I can see a little bit of sag on the filament. This printer does just have one fan for cooling the filament, the PLA, so I think that if you were to maybe add a better shroud or modify that, you could get slightly better cooling, but overall it was definitely sufficient, and I thought that the model turned out really nice. After that completed, I swapped it out for some red PLA, and I printed out the little Dr. Heroes that Wexter created for all of the awesome healthcare workers and doctors out there during what craziness is going on in the world. I printed that out, and that turned out awesome, and it was adorable. I actually thought I printed it out bigger. It was smaller than I anticipated, so it was a fairly quick print, which I then followed up with an awesome model I found of just a little staircase around a lighthouse, also in that same red PLA, which turned out great in my opinion. The only other thing I wanted to try was a little bit of PETG, since that is the second most common material I print with. So I went ahead and found this hand model that's looking like doing this symbol, I don't know, like the OK symbol or very nice symbol. And I went ahead and sliced it up, I hit print, and right away I saw that it was incredibly stringy. So I went back to Cura, I lowered the temperature by 5C on the PTG, I increased retraction, and I increased the retraction speed ever so slightly. I went ahead, resliced it, hit print again, and it turned out pretty damn good. There was not a ton of hairs. There were still some hairs, and it's not a perfect profile by any means, but I was able to print PTG in what I would consider pretty damn good or acceptable quality. If I do plan on doing a lot more PTG on this printer down the line, then yeah, I think I'd play a bit more around with some retraction tests just to make sure I get those settings dialed in a little bit better. Overall, I've been incredibly impressed with this FLSUN Q5 Delta 3D printer. For the price of, again, around $230-ish, I certainly think that if you are or have been looking at adding a small Delta to your lineup, or just want to get a Delta 3D printer and you don't need a big Delta 3D printer, then this is an awesome little Delta. I really like that it doesn't take up a whole lot of space on my desktop. I mean, it's substantially smaller footprint than a lot of my similar Cartesian style 3D printers. And again, all of my kind of Creality-esque style large form factor printers, I don't always need to print big parts, and so for those times this is definitely going to become a printer that I think that I will depend upon more so. Construction on this machine is pretty solid, considering it's only got 20 by 23 aluminum rails running up and down the sides. The only thing that I'm not crazy about is the spool holder on top of the machine. It's a pretty small detail, but I just feel that it is a little bit too thin and feels kind of flimsy holding on to like the sheet metal on top of the Delta, and when you put the spool on, you can definitely feel it kind of wobbling a bit under the weight. It was fine, and it's definitely going to be sufficient for holding a spool of filament, but for whatever reasoning, I think that a better job can be done. So I might end up finding a printable solution or modeling something of my own, but it definitely gets the job done. It's something that it's a small pet peeve of mine that I think could have been done a little bit better. If you guys want to find out more about the FLSUN Q5 or purchase one for yourself, links will be in the description down below. If there's anything specific that I potentially missed or that you had a question about regarding this machine, also please let me know in the comments down below. I will absolutely do my best to answer all of your comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I've been making a video every single Saturday, and if you enjoy 3D printing content and making content, I super appreciate it. And if you want to support the channel even more, I will place links in the description also to my Patreon. Thank you to all my Patreon followers and contributors. You guys make it where I'm able to contribute more of my time into doing what I love, which is making content for you guys every single week. So on that note, I will see you guys in my next video, and I am out. Peace, guys.